The blood on her hands would not wash away no matter how hard Dahlia Zimmerman scrubbed them raw in the creek water that ran cold through the Arizona Territory in the summer of 1878. She had been kneeling there for what felt like hours, her threadbare dress soaked through at the knees, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her face. The water ran clear over her fingers, but in her mind she still saw crimson. She still felt the weight of her father's head in her lap as he took his last breath on the floor of their cabin, still heard her mother's screams cut short by the outlaws who had ridden through their homestead like a plague. That had been 3 months ago, and Dahlia had not spoken a word since. The town of Oro Blanco sat nestled in the mountains of southern Arizona, a silver mining settlement that had swelled with fortune seekers and those running from their pasts. Dahlia had walked into town 2 weeks prior, her shoes worn through, her eyes hollow. The local minister's wife, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, had taken her in without asking questions. The silence that surrounded Dahlia spoke volumes enough, but charity had its limits, and Mrs. Patterson had gently suggested that Dahlia might find work at the Silver Bell Saloon, serving tables and helping in the kitchen. It was respectable enough work, Mrs. Patterson assured her, and the owner, a widow named Constance Wright, ran a decent establishment. Dahlia had nodded, unable to form the words to express her gratitude or her fear. That was how she found herself on a sweltering afternoon, standing outside the saloon with trembling hands, trying to gather the courage to walk through those swinging doors. The sounds from inside were overwhelming after so much silence. Piano music, loud voices, laughter that seemed foreign to her ears. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe. "You look like you are about to face a firing squad rather than walk into a saloon." The voice was deep and warm, tinged with amusement but not unkind. Dahlia's eyes flew open, and she found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of whiskey in firelight. He wore the unmistakable clothing of a working cowboy, dusty leather chaps over worn denim, a faded blue shirt, and a hat that had seen better days. A bandana hung loose around his neck, and there was a gentleness in his face that contradicted the hardness of his profession. Dahlia opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The familiar panic rose in her chest. She looked away quickly, feeling the heat of shame creep up her neck. "I am sorry," the man said quickly, removing his hat. "I did not mean to startle you. My name is Vaughn Barrett. I work at the Circle T Ranch just outside town." He paused, studying her with concern. "Are you all right, miss?" She managed a small nod, still unable to meet his eyes, her hands twisted in the fabric of her dress, a nervous habit she had developed. "You are the new girl Mrs. Patterson took in, are you not?" Vaughn asked gently. "I heard Constance was looking for help. She is a good woman, fair employer. You do not need to be afraid." Dahlia finally looked up at him, and something in his expression made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. He was not looking at her with pity or curiosity. There was something else there, something that felt like understanding. "Can you tell me your name?" he asked. She swallowed hard and managed to whisper, "Dahlia." It was the first word she had spoken since that terrible night, and it scraped against her throat like broken glass. Vaughn smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "That is a beautiful name. It suits you." He gestured toward the saloon. "Would it help if I walked in with you?" Sometimes things are less frightening when you do not face them alone. Dahlia found herself nodding before she could think better of it. There was something about this stranger that felt safe, even in a world where safety had become an illusion. Vaughn held the door open for her, and together they stepped into the Silver Bell. The interior was better than Dahlia had imagined, cleaner and more orderly. The bar ran along one wall polished wood that gleamed in the lamplight. Round tables filled the main floor, and a piano sat in the corner where a thin man with quick fingers produced a lively tune. There were men at the bar and seated at tables, but the atmosphere felt more like a gathering place than the den of sin she had feared. A woman approached them immediately, her red hair piled high on her head, her green dress elegant but practical. This was clearly Constance Wright, and she looked between Vaughn and Dahlia with shrewd but kind eyes. "Vaughn Barrett, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Constance asked, her voice carrying the hint of an Irish accent. "I am just escorting Miss Dahlia here for her first day," Vaughn replied. "Wanted to make sure she found the place all right." Constance turned her full attention to Dahlia, and her expression softened. "Ah, you must be the girl Martha Patterson told me about. Welcome, dear. Do not look so frightened. We are not so bad here." She glanced at Vaughn. "Thank you for bringing her, but I am sure you have work to do." "Yes, madam," Vaughn said. He turned to Dahlia and touched the brim of his hat. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Miss Dahlia. I am sure I will see you again soon." As he walked away, Dahlia felt an unexpected pang of loss, as if the only anchor she had found was drifting away. But Constance was already ushering her toward the back, explaining the layout of the saloon and what her duties would entail. The work was hard but straightforward. Dahlia served drinks and meals, cleared tables, and helped in the kitchen. She moved through her tasks in silence, communicating with nods and gestures. Some of the patrons tried to engage her in conversation, but they quickly learned she would not respond. Most left her alone after that, though she occasionally caught them watching her with curiosity. Constance was patient with her silence, never pushing her to speak. "Everyone has their reasons," the older woman said one evening as they cleaned up after closing. "You will talk when you are ready, or you will not. Either way, you are doing good work here." 3 days into her new job, Vaughn returned to the saloon. Dahlia was wiping down tables when she heard his voice at the bar, ordering a whiskey. Her heart did an odd flutter in her chest, and she found herself glancing over at him more often than she should. He caught her eye and smiled, raising his glass in a small salute. Heat flooded her cheeks, and she quickly looked away when her shift ended that evening. She found Vaughn waiting outside. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that seemed too beautiful for a world that held so much pain. "I hope you do not think I am being too forward," Vaughn said as she stepped outside, "but I wondered if I could walk you back to the Patterson house. It is getting dark, and these streets can be rough at night." Dahlia hesitated, then nodded. They fell into step together, walking through the dusty streets of Oro Blanco. The evening air was cooler now, a relief after the heat of the day. "I heard you lost your family," Vaughn said quietly after a moment. "I am sorry. I know there are no words that can make that better, but I am sorry." Dahlia's steps faltered, and she stopped walking. Her chest felt tight, and for a moment she thought she might shatter right there in the street. Vaughn stopped too, turning to face her. "I lost my parents when I was 16, he said. "Cholera took them both within days of each other. For a long time I thought I would never feel whole again. Like someone had reached inside me and scooped out everything important, left me just a hollow shell going through the motions." She looked up at him with wide eyes, and he continued, "I am not saying I know exactly what you are going through. Everyone's pain is their own. But I do know what it is like to feel broken beyond repair." He paused, his expression earnest, "And I want you to know that it does get easier. Not better exactly, but easier. You learn to carry it." Dahlia felt tears burning behind her eyes, the first she had allowed since she had buried her parents. She shook her head slowly, and when she finally managed to speak, her voice was barely audible. "I am too broken. "No," Vaughn said firmly. "You are not broken. You are hurt, and that is different." He took a careful step closer. "My grandmother used to make these beautiful mosaics out of broken pottery. She would take shattered pieces that seemed useless and create something stunning. She always said that broken pieces can create beautiful mosaics. That the cracks and fractures are what make the final piece interesting." A tear slid down Dahlia's cheek, and then another. Before she knew it, she was crying in earnest, great heaving sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of her soul. Vaughn did not try to touch her or shush her. He simply stood there, a steady presence, letting her fall apart. When the storm of tears finally subsided, Dahlia felt emptied out but somehow lighter. She wiped at her face with shaking hands. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thanks needed," Vaughn replied gently. "Come on, let me get you home before Mrs. Patterson sends out a search party." Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Vaughn would come to the saloon several times a week, always timing his visits to coincide with the end of Dahlia's shift. He would walk her home, and they would talk. Or rather, he would talk, and she would listen, occasionally offering a word or two in response. He told her about his work at the Circle T, about the cattle drives and the harsh beauty of the open range. He told her about his dreams of one day having his own small spread. Nothing fancy, just enough land for a modest herd and a house with a real wood floor. He told her funny stories about the other ranch hands, about horses with personalities and cattle with stubborn streaks. Slowly, carefully, Dahlia began to open up in return. At first, it was just small things. Her favorite color was blue. She had always wanted to learn to read better. She liked the smell of rain on dry earth. Then, one evening as they walked, she told him about her father teaching her to recognize bird calls, about her mother's garden and the way she would hum while she worked, about the little cabin that had been their home and how safe she had felt there. "They sound like they were wonderful people," Vaughn said softly. "They were," Dahlia agreed, and for the first time saying it did not feel like swallowing glass. She did not tell him about that night, about the violence and the terror. She could not yet. But Vaughn did not push. He seemed content to let her share what she could when she could. As autumn approached and the oppressive heat began to ease, something shifted between them. Dahlia found herself looking forward to Vaughn's visits with an anticipation that went beyond simple friendship. She noticed things about him she had not before. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the calluses on his hands from years of hard work, the gentle way he treated everyone around him. One evening in late September, Vaughn arrived at the saloon earlier than usual. Dahlia was surprised to see him walk in during the dinner rush, dressed in clothes that were clearly his best, his hair still damp from a recent washing. He approached her table with an uncharacteristic nervousness. "Dahlia, I was wondering if you might do me the honor of having dinner with me. Not just walking and talking, but an actual meal together. There is a decent restaurant down the street." Dahlia felt her heart skip. This was different from their walks, more intentional. She should say no. She was not ready for this, was she? But looking at his hopeful face, she found herself nodding. "Yes," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "I would like that." Vaughn's face lit up with a smile that could have rivaled the sun. "Truly, that is wonderful. I will wait for you to finish your shift." The restaurant was small but clean, with red checkered tablecloths and the smell of roasted meat and fresh bread. Vaughn pulled out a chair for Dahlia, a gesture that made her feel both flustered and pleased. They ordered beef stew and cornbread, and for the first time they sat across from each other at a table like normal people on a normal evening. It felt momentous and terrifying. "I need to be honest with you," Vaughn said after the food arrived. He was not eating, just looking at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "These past weeks, getting to know you, walking with you, talking with you, they have been the best part of my days. I find myself thinking about you when I should be focusing on my work. Wondering if you are all right, hoping you are smiling." Dahlia's hands tightened around her spoon. Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "I know you have been through something terrible," Vaughn continued, "and I know you are still healing. I do not want to rush you or make you uncomfortable, but I also could not let another day pass without telling you that I care for you deeply, more than I probably should after such a short time." "Vaughn," Dahlia whispered, his name feeling both foreign and familiar on her tongue. "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know. Whatever you need from me, friendship or more or nothing at all, I will respect that, but I had to tell you the truth." Dahlia set down her spoon with trembling fingers. She thought about the past months, about the darkness that had consumed her, about the nights she had lain awake wondering if she would ever feel anything but pain again. And then she thought about Vaughn, about his kindness and his patience, about the way he had stood beside her without asking for anything in return. "I am afraid," she admitted quietly. "I am afraid that I am too damaged to be what you deserve. That the things I have seen and experienced have changed me into something broken and beyond repair." Vaughn reached across the table, and with careful slowness that gave her time to pull away if she wished, took her hand in his. His touch was warm and solid and real. "You remember what I said about mosaics?" he asked. "About how broken pieces can create something beautiful." "I meant that, Dahlia. You are not beyond repair. You are a survivor. And if you will let me, I would be honored to stand beside you while you put those pieces back together. Not to fix you because you do not need fixing, but to be there while you heal." Tears welled in Dahlia's eyes, but this time they were not tears of sorrow alone. There was something else mixed in, something that felt almost like hope. "I care for you too," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It scares me how much I care for you, but I do." Vaughn's smile was radiant. He squeezed her hand gently. "Then that is enough. That is more than enough." They ate their dinner then, talking more freely than they ever had before. Dahlia found herself laughing at one of Vaughn's stories about an ornery bull that had chased the ranch foreman up a fence. The sound of her own laughter surprised her, rusty from disuse but genuine. As they left the restaurant, Vaughn offered her his arm and she took it. They walked slowly through the streets of Oro Blanco, in no hurry to reach their destination. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "Tell me about your dreams," Vaughn said. "Before everything happened, what did you want for your life?" Dahlia was quiet for a moment, remembering the girl she had been before that terrible night. "I wanted a family," she said finally. "A home where people I loved gathered around a table. I wanted to plant a garden like my mother had. I wanted to feel safe and loved and useful." She paused. "Simple things, I suppose." "Not simple at all," Vaughn said. "Those are the things that matter most. Land and cattle and money, those are just means to an end. But family and home and love, those are the true treasures." They had reached the Patterson house, and Dahlia was reluctant to go inside. She turned to face Vaughn, looking up at him in the moonlight. "Thank you," she said, "for tonight, for everything." "The pleasure was mine," Vaughn replied. He hesitated, then added, "May I see you again tomorrow? Perhaps we could take a walk in the daylight for once. I could show you the path up into the foothills. The view is spectacular." "I would like that," Dahlia said, and she meant it with her whole heart. Vaughn tipped his hat to her, his eyes warm. "Good night, Dahlia, sleep well." As she watched him walk away, Dahlia felt something unfurling in her chest, something that had been curled up tight and dormant. It was fragile and new, but it was there. It was hope, and maybe, just maybe, the first stirrings of happiness. The next morning, Dahlia woke earlier than usual. She borrowed a riding skirt from Mrs. Patterson and braided her hair carefully. When Vaughn arrived on horseback, leading a gentle mare, she was waiting outside. "Good morning," he said, dismounting with easy grace. "This is Daisy. She is the sweetest horse in the territory. She will take good care of you." Dahlia approached the mare slowly, holding out her hand for Daisy to sniff. The horse whickered softly and nudged her palm. Dahlia felt a smile tug at her lips. With Vaughn's help, she mounted the horse, settling into the saddle with only a moment of awkwardness. It had been years since she had ridden, but the skill came back quickly. They rode out of town at an easy pace, heading toward the mountains that rose up against the eastern sky. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. Dahlia found herself relaxing into the rhythm of the ride, letting the motion soothe something deep inside her. Vaughn led them up a winding trail that climbed into the foothills. He pointed out landmarks along the way, telling her stories about the land and the people who lived there. His love for this place was evident in every word, and Dahlia found herself seeing the beauty she had been too numb to notice before. When they reached a flat outcropping of rock that overlooked the valley below, Vaughn helped her dismount. The view was breathtaking. Oro Blanco was a cluster of buildings in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys. Beyond the town, the land stretched out in rolling hills and distant mountains, a patchwork of greens and browns and golds. "This is where I come when I need to think," Vaughn said, standing beside her. "Something about being up here makes everything feel more manageable. Like no matter how big your problems seem, the world is bigger still." Dahlia nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Up here, she could breathe more easily. The weight on her chest felt lighter. They sat on the rocks, letting the horses graze nearby. Vaughn unpacked a small bag he had brought, producing fresh bread, cheese, and apples. They ate in comfortable silence, and then Vaughn lay back against the stone, his hat over his face to block the sun. "Tell me something," he said from beneath the hat. "Something you have never told anyone else." Dahlia considered this. There were so many things she had never told anyone, dark things that lived in the corners of her mind. But that was not what he was asking for, she realized. He wanted to know her, the real her, not just her pain. "I used to write stories," she said softly. "Nothing serious, just little tales I would make up. My mother taught me to write, and I would fill up scraps of paper with adventures and romances and mysteries. I wanted to write a whole book someday." Vaughn pushed his hat back and looked at her with interest. "What kind of stories?" "Silly things," Dahlia said, feeling self-conscious. "Stories about girls who went on adventures, who were brave and strong and did not need rescuing." "Those do not sound silly at all," Vaughn said. "They sound wonderful. Do you still write?" Dahlia shook her head. "I have not since." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Maybe you could start again," Vaughn suggested gently. "Not because you have to, but because you loved it once. Sometimes the things we loved before can help us find our way back to ourselves." The idea planted itself in Dahlia's mind, a tiny seed that she was not ready to examine too closely yet. But it was there, and that meant something. They spent the rest of the morning on that outcropping, talking and laughing and simply being. Vaughn told her more about his dreams for the future, his hope to build something lasting. Dahlia found herself sharing memories of her childhood, the good ones that she had thought were lost forever beneath the weight of tragedy. When they finally rode back to town, the sun was high overhead. Dahlia felt tired, but in a good way, as if she had exercised muscles that had been dormant too long. "Thank you for today," she told Vaughn as they reached town. "It was exactly what I needed." "Then we should do it again," Vaughn said. "Whenever you want. I am at your disposal, Miss Zimmerman." The formality was teasing, and it made Dahlia smile. She was smiling so much more lately, she realized. The expression felt less foreign on her face. As October arrived and the weather turned cooler, Dahlia and Vaughn fell into a pattern. He would come to town on his days off, and they would spend hours together. Sometimes they rode out into the countryside. Sometimes they simply walked through town, stopping to browse the mercantile or watch the sun set from the edge of town. They talked about everything and nothing, and with each conversation, Dahlia felt herself becoming more whole. She also began to notice the way other women in town looked at Vaughn with interest and sometimes longing. He was a handsome man, she realized, though she had been too wrapped up in her own pain to fully appreciate it at first. But more than his looks, there was something about his character that drew people to him. He was kind without being soft, strong without being harsh. He treated everyone with respect, from the wealthy mine owners to the poorest prospectors, and he had chosen her. That thought filled Dahlia with wonder and a fair bit of terror. One evening as they walked, she voiced her fear. "Why me?" she asked abruptly. "There are other women in this town. Whole women who do not carry the weight I carry. Why would you choose me?" Vaughn stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression serious. "Because you are exactly who I want, not despite what you have been through, but because of it. Because you are strong enough to survive the unsurvivable. Because you get up every day and keep going even when it would be easier to give up. Because when you smile, it feels like watching the sun break through storm clouds." He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch feather light. "And because when I am with you, I feel like I am exactly where I am supposed to be. Like everything in my life led me to that moment outside the saloon when I saw you gathering your courage to walk inside. I do not believe in much beyond hard work and honest dealing, but I believe we were meant to find each other." Dahlia felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were good tears this time. "I am falling in love with you," she whispered, the admission both terrifying and liberating. "I tried not to. I told myself it was too soon, that I was not ready, but it does not seem to matter what I tell myself. My heart has made its own decision." Vaughn's expression softened into something tender and fierce all at once. "I have been in love with you since that first day," he said. "I just did not want to say it and scare you away. But since we are being honest, you should know that I love you, Dahlia Zimmerman. I love your strength and your gentleness. I love the way you notice small things, like the way the light falls or the sound of birds in the morning. I love your silence and your words equally. I love all of you." "Vaughn," she breathed, and then he was kissing her, gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was Dahlia's first kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting off on an adventure all at once. She leaned into him, her hands clutching the front of his shirt, letting herself feel the full weight of her love for this man who had seen her at her most broken and had not looked away. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "I want to build a life with you," Vaughn said. "I know it is fast, and I know you might need more time, but I need you to know that is where my heart is heading. I want to marry you, Dahlia. I want to build that home you dreamed of, plant that garden. I want to wake up beside you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want to give you the safe and loving life you deserve." Dahlia's heart felt too big for her chest. "I want that too," she said. "I am still healing, and I imagine I will be for a long time. There are things about that night I have not told you, things I have not been able to speak about, but I want to try. With you, I want to try." "We will take it at whatever pace you need," Vaughn assured her. "There is no rush. I am not going anywhere." They walked back to the Patterson house hand in hand, and when Vaughn kissed her goodnight on the porch, Dahlia felt like she was floating. Mrs. Patterson was waiting inside with knowing eyes and a gentle smile. "I see things are progressing well with Mr. Barrett," she said. Dahlia could not help but smile. "Yes, madam, they are. He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said. "The kind of man who will stand by you through anything. You have chosen well, dear." "I think he might have chosen me," Dahlia said softly. "Well, then, you have both chosen wisely, Mrs. Patterson replied with a warm laugh. That night, for the first time since that terrible night months ago, Dahlia slept without nightmares. She dreamed, instead of a small house with blue curtains, a garden full of vegetables and flowers, and a man with whiskey-colored eyes smiling at her across a kitchen table. The following weeks were some of the happiest Dahlia had ever known. She and Vaughn saw each other as often as his work allowed, and their love deepened with each meeting. He brought her small gifts, a pretty stone he found on the range, wildflowers that he had picked himself, a book of poetry he thought she might enjoy. Dahlia found herself thinking about the future with an excitement she had thought lost forever. She began writing again, just small things at first, little observations and fragments of stories. Vaughn had been right. Returning to something she had loved before did help her find pieces of herself she thought were gone. She also, slowly and painfully, began to tell Vaughn about that night. It came out in pieces, over several conversations, and each telling felt like lancing a wound. But Vaughn listened without judgment, holding her hand or simply sitting close, his steady presence an anchor. When she finally told him everything, about the violence and the helplessness and the guilt she carried for surviving when her parents had not, Vaughn pulled her into his arms and held her while she cried. "It was not your fault," he said fiercely. "None of it was your fault. You were a victim and you survived. That is not something to feel guilty about. That is something to be proud of." "I hid," Dahlia sobbed into his chest. "I hid in the root cellar while they killed my parents. I could hear everything and I did nothing." "You did what you had to do to survive," Vaughn said firmly. "If you had not hidden, you would be dead too, and those men would still have done what they did. Your dying would not have saved your parents. It would have just been one more tragedy." Logically, Dahlia knew he was right. But logic and feeling were two different things. Still, having spoken the words aloud, having shared the darkest parts of her experience, she felt a small measure of the weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you," she whispered, "for listening, for not thinking less of me." "I could never think less of you," Vaughn said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "If anything, I am even more in awe of your strength." November brought the first real cold to the Arizona mountains. The cottonwood trees turned gold, and there was talk of an early winter. Vaughn began staying in town more often, renting a small room above the general store so he would not have to make the long ride back to the Circle T in the dark. One evening, he came to the saloon with a nervous energy that Dahlia noticed immediately. When her shift ended, he led her not toward the Patterson house but in the opposite direction, toward the edge of town. "Where are we going?" she asked, curious. "I want to show you something," Vaughn said. "I hope it is not too presumptuous of me." He led her to a piece of land just beyond the town limits, maybe 5 acres of scrubby grass and scattered mesquite trees. It was not much to look at, but the view of the mountains was spectacular. "I bought it," Vaughn said, watching her face carefully. "I have been saving for years, and I finally had enough. It is not much, but it is a start. I thought maybe if you were willing we could build something here, together." Dahlia turned to look at him, her heart in her throat. "Vaughn, are you asking me to marry you?" He dropped to one knee right there in the dirt, taking her hand in both of his. "I am. I know we have not been courting for very long by traditional standards, but I also know that I love you more than I have ever loved anyone. I know that I want to spend every day of the rest of my life making you happy. So, Dahlia Zimmerman, will you do me the incredible honor of becoming my wife?" Tears were streaming down Dahlia's face, but she was smiling brighter than she ever had. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Vaughn, I will marry you." He stood and swept her into his arms, spinning her around as she laughed. When he set her down, he kissed her with a passion that left her breathless and dizzy and more alive than she had felt in months. "I do not have a ring yet," Vaughn admitted, looking almost embarrassed. "I spent everything I had on the land, but I will get you one, I promise." "I do not need a ring," Dahlia said, cupping his face in her hands. "I just need you." They stood there on their land as the sun set, planning and dreaming. A small house to start, just a couple of rooms. They could add on as needed. A barn for animals, a chicken coop, a garden plot. It would be hard work, but they would do it together. "We could be married before Christmas," Vaughn suggested, "if that is not too soon for you." "That sounds perfect," Dahlia said. She could not imagine waiting any longer to start their life together. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Oro Blanco. Mrs. Patterson was delighted, immediately beginning to plan a modest wedding. Constance at the saloon offered to host a reception, and even the minister, a kind man named Reverend Thomas, seemed pleased by the match. Dahlia found herself the recipient of unexpected kindness from the women of the town. They brought her fabric for a dress, offered advice on running a household, shared recipes and housekeeping tips. It was as if, in accepting Vaughn's love, she had been accepted into the community as well. The dress she made with Mrs. Patterson's help was simple but beautiful. A cream-colored cotton with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. It was nothing fancy, but when Dahlia looked at herself in the mirror, she thought she looked happy. More than that, she looked like herself again, like the girl she had been before tragedy struck, but with a new strength in her eyes. Vaughn spent his days working at the Circle T and his evenings working on their land. He began construction on a small cabin with help from some of the other ranch hands. It was a simple structure, one large room that would serve as kitchen and living area, with a separate bedroom and a loft that could be used for storage or, someday, children. The thought of children both thrilled and terrified Dahlia. Could she be a mother? Could she raise a child when she still felt like a scared girl herself sometimes? But when she mentioned these fears to Vaughn, he simply smiled and told her he had no doubts about her ability to be an amazing mother when the time came. On December 15th, 1878, Dahlia Zimmerman married Vaughn Barrett in a simple ceremony at the Oro Blanco church. She wore her cream-colored dress and carried a bouquet of winter wildflowers that Vaughn had somehow managed to find. He wore his best clothes, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him as he waited at the altar. When Reverend Thomas asked if anyone objected to the union, Dahlia held her breath, half expecting some disaster to strike. But there was only silence, and then the Reverend's gentle voice continuing with the ceremony. The vows were traditional, but when Vaughn said the words "for better or worse," in sickness and in health, he was looking at her with such love and certainty that Dahlia felt any remaining doubts dissolve. This man knew her pain and her past, and he was choosing her anyway. Not despite her brokenness, but with full acceptance of all she was and all she had been through. When Reverend Thomas pronounced them husband and wife, Vaughn kissed her sweetly, and the small gathering of townspeople erupted in applause. Dahlia laughed against his lips, feeling a joy so pure it was almost painful. The reception at the Silver Bell was lively and warm. There was music and dancing, food and drink, and more well wishes than Dahlia could count. She danced with her new husband, feeling safe in his strong arms, and thought about how impossible this happiness had seemed just a few months ago. As the evening wore on and the party showed no signs of slowing, Vaughn leaned down and whispered in her ear, "What do you say we slip away to our new home, Mrs. Barrett?" The name sent a thrill through her. Mrs. Barrett. She was someone's wife now. She belonged somewhere again. They made their exit quietly, walking hand in hand through the cold December night toward their little cabin. Vaughn had been out earlier to light a fire in the small stove, and the interior was warm and welcoming. He had built simple furniture, a bed frame with a thick mattress, a table with 2 chairs, shelves on the wall. It was sparse but clean, and it was theirs. "Welcome home," Vaughn said softly, lifting her over the threshold with ease. Dahlia looked around the cabin at the evidence of Vaughn's hard work and care and felt emotion swell in her chest. "It is perfect," she said. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, a coming together that felt both natural and profound. Vaughn was patient and gentle, letting Dahlia set the pace, and when they finally came together fully, it felt like the final piece of her healing clicking into place. She was not broken. She was not ruined. She was loved and whole and exactly where she was meant to be. Afterward, lying in her husband's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, Dahlia felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. "Thank you," she whispered into the darkness. "For what?" Vaughn asked, his hand stroking gently through her hair. "For seeing me when I could not see myself. For believing I could be whole when I thought I was too broken. For loving me." "Loving you is the easiest thing I have ever done," Vaughn said. He tilted her face up so he could kiss her forehead. "And you are not broken, remember. You are a mosaic, beautiful and unique and strong." Dahlia smiled against his chest. "Broken pieces creating something beautiful," she murmured. "Exactly," Vaughn said. They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other's arms, and Dahlia slept deeply and dreamlessly, secure in the knowledge that she was safe and loved. The early days of their marriage were an adjustment as they learned to live together. Dahlia had to get used to cooking for 2, to sharing space and making decisions jointly. Vaughn had to remember that he was no longer alone, that someone was waiting for him at home, but the adjustments were sweet ones. Dahlia loved having someone to cook for, to take care of. Vaughn loved coming home to a warm house and a loving wife. They quickly developed routines and rhythms that worked for them. Vaughn continued to work at the Circle T, but he spent all his spare time improving their land. He built a chicken coop and bought 6 laying hens. He dug a well so they would not have to haul water from town. He started planning where they would plant crops come spring. Dahlia threw herself into making their cabin a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, blue ones like in her dream. She planted herb boxes that would survive the winter inside. She started writing more seriously, filling notebook after notebook with stories and observations. Vaughn built her a small desk near the window where the light was best, and she would sit there in the afternoons, writing while he worked outside. Winter deepened, and with it came a quiet contentment. Some days were harder than others. Dahlia still had nightmares occasionally, still had moments when grief would rise up unexpectedly and threaten to pull her under. But now she had Vaughn to anchor her, to hold her through the storms and remind her that she was not alone. On Christmas morning, Vaughn surprised her with a gift, a beautiful bound journal with her name embossed in gold on the cover. "For your stories," he said, "so you can write them down properly." Dahlia was so moved she could barely speak. She threw her arms around his neck and held him tight. "I love you so much," she managed finally. "I love you too," Vaughn said, "more than I can say." She gave him a gift as well, a new hat that she had been secretly making from leather she had carefully saved money to buy. His old one was falling apart and she wanted him to have something nice. When he tried it on, it fit perfectly, and the look of delight on his face made all the work worthwhile. As winter turned to spring, they began preparations for planting. Dahlia designed a large garden, planning for vegetables and flowers both. Vaughn plowed the land, turning the hard earth into neat rows. Together they planted seeds, working side by side in the warm sunshine. One evening in late March, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Dahlia turned to Vaughn with news she had been holding close for a few days, wanting to be sure before she said anything. "I am going to have a baby," she said softly. Vaughn's head whipped around so fast she worried he might hurt himself. "Truly?" he asked, his voice filled with wonder and hope. "Truly," Dahlia confirmed, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "The baby should come in early October." Vaughn let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, careful even in his excitement not to squeeze too tight. "We are going to be parents," he said, half laughing, half crying. "Dahlia, we are going to have a family." "We are," she agreed, and the joy in her heart was so pure and bright it almost hurt. A year ago, she had thought she would never be happy again, never feel anything but pain and loss. And now here she was, married to the love of her life and expecting their first child. The broken pieces of her life had indeed created something beautiful. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Dahlia continued to work and write, though Vaughn hovered protectively, always worried she was doing too much. The garden flourished under their care, providing vegetables for their table and enough extra to sell in town. The chickens laid eggs faithfully, and Vaughn brought home a young cow that would provide milk. Their little homestead was becoming something real, something lasting. Neighbors would stop by occasionally, and Dahlia found herself building friendships with other women in the area. She was no longer the broken, silent girl who had stumbled into Oro Blanco. She was Dahlia Barrett, wife and soon-to-be mother, a woman rebuilding her life one day at a time. In early June, Vaughn came home with surprising news. The owner of the Circle T, an aging rancher named Thomas Carlyle, had offered Vaughn a promotion to foreman. It would mean better pay and more responsibility, but it would also mean longer hours. "What do you think?" Vaughn asked Dahlia that evening as they discussed the offer. "The money would be helpful, especially with the baby coming, but I hate the thought of being away from you more." "You should take it," Dahlia said firmly. "This is an opportunity and we would be foolish to pass it up. I will be fine. I am not alone out here and you will still come home every night." Vaughn studied her face carefully. "You are sure?" "I am sure," Dahlia said. "I am proud of you. You work harder than any man I know and you deserve this recognition." So Vaughn accepted the promotion, and their income improved significantly. They were able to put money aside for the first time, saving toward the future. They talked about expanding their land, maybe buying some cattle of their own eventually. As summer ripened into fall and Dahlia's belly grew round with their child, she found herself thinking often about her parents. She wished they could have met Vaughn, could have seen the life she was building. But in quiet moments, she felt their presence, as if they were watching over her with approval and love. She had forgiven herself, finally, for surviving. She understood now that living well, loving fully, and building a good life was the best way to honor their memory. She thought they would be happy for her, proud of her strength. On October 3, 1879, Dahlia went into labor. Vaughn rode frantically to fetch the midwife, a capable woman named Agnes Harper, while Dahlia tried to breathe through the contractions. Labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the night, but finally, just as the sun was beginning to rise, Dahlia brought their child into the world. "It is a boy," Agnes announced, placing the squalling infant on Dahlia's chest. A healthy, strong boy. Dahlia looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect features and the shock of dark hair on his head, and felt love unlike anything she had ever experienced before. This was her child, hers and Vaughn's, a new life created from their love. Vaughn, who had been pacing outside, burst into the room at Agnes's summons. When he saw his wife and son, tears streamed unashamedly down his face. He approached the bed cautiously, as if afraid he might be dreaming. "Can I hold him?" he asked softly. Dahlia carefully transferred the baby to his father's arms, and Vaughn cradled his son with a gentleness that made her heart ache with love. "Hello, little one," Vaughn whispered. "I am your papa. I promise I will protect you and love you every day of your life. What should we name him?" Dahlia asked. They had discussed names but never quite decided. Now, looking at their son, Vaughn said, "What about Henry? After your father." Fresh tears sprang to Dahlia's eyes. "Henry James Barrett," she said. "After both our fathers, I think that would be perfect." And so their son was named, a bridge between the past they had lost and the future they were building together. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Little Henry was a good baby, but he still needed constant care. Dahlia discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, managing the household and the baby while Vaughn worked long days at the Circle T. But Vaughn was a devoted father. He would come home exhausted and still want to hold his son, to rock him to sleep or just watch him breathe. He helped with night feedings, changed diapers without complaint, and looked at both Dahlia and Henry with such adoration it made her heart full to bursting. As Henry grew, his personality began to emerge. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. He had Vaughn's whiskey-colored eyes and Dahlia's dark hair, a perfect blend of them both. The years that followed were full and rich. They added onto the cabin, building a proper parlor and another bedroom. Their garden expanded and they acquired more animals, more chickens, 2 more cows, a pig, a barn cat who adopted them one day and never left. Vaughn eventually bought a small herd of cattle, running them on leased rangeland, working toward his dream of being a true rancher. Henry grew into a bright, energetic toddler, then a curious little boy. Dahlia taught him to read and write, sharing her love of stories with him. Vaughn taught him about animals and the land, about hard work and integrity. When Henry was 3, Dahlia became pregnant again. This time, she carried the baby more easily, her body remembering what to do. In the spring of 1883, they welcomed a daughter into the world, a tiny perfect girl with Vaughn's smile and Dahlia's spirit. They named her Ruth Alina, after Dahlia's mother and Vaughn's grandmother, the one who had made the Mosaics. Ruth was different from Henry, more serious and contemplative even as an infant. Where Henry had been all energy and motion, Ruth was content to observe, taking in the world with wide, thoughtful eyes. Their family felt complete. 4 people bound together by love and shared experience, building a life in the Arizona mountains. Dahlia sometimes marveled at the path that had brought her here, from that broken girl kneeling by the creek to this woman surrounded by love and purpose. She continued to write, and when Henry started school in town, she began submitting stories to magazines back east. To her shock and delight, one was accepted for publication. It was a small thing, just a short story in a modest publication, but it felt like validation. Her words had worth. Her voice mattered. Vaughn was fiercely proud of her, showing the magazine to everyone he met. "My wife is a published author," he would say, and the pride in his voice made Dahlia glow with happiness. Their homestead continued to prosper. With Vaughn's steady income and wise management, they were able to buy more land, expanding their holdings. They built a proper barn and a larger house, a comfortable home with real wood floors and glass windows. It was not grand, but it was solid and warm and filled with love. As the children grew older, they became more involved in the work of the homestead. Henry loved working with the animals, already showing signs of following in his father's footsteps. Ruth, meanwhile, had inherited her mother's love of learning and spent hours reading any book she could get her hands on. In the summer of 1888, when Henry was 9 and Ruth was 5, Dahlia and Vaughn sat on their porch one evening after the children had gone to bed. The valley spread out before them, peaceful in the twilight. "You remember the first time I walked you home?" Vaughn asked, reaching over to take her hand. "Of course," Dahlia said. "You told me about mosaics, about how broken pieces can create something beautiful." "I was right, was I not?" Vaughn said, squeezing her hand. "Look at what we have created. This life, our children, everything we have built together. It is beautiful, Dahlia. You are beautiful." Dahlia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling content to her very bones. "I used to think I was too broken to deserve happiness," she said softly. "I truly believed that what I had been through had ruined me for a normal life." "And now?" Vaughn asked. "Now I know that being broken does not mean being ruined. It just means you have to find a new way to be whole, and you helped me do that. You stood by me while I figured out how to piece myself back together." "We pieced each other back together," Vaughn corrected gently. "You saved me just as much as I saved you. Before I met you, I was just going through the motions, working towards some distant goal without really understanding why. You gave my life meaning." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars begin to appear in the darkening sky. Inside the house, their children slept safely in their beds. Around them, the land they had cultivated and cared for stretched out, evidence of years of hard work and dedication. "I love you, Dahlia Barrett," Vaughn said, "more now than even the day I married you. Every day with you is a gift." "I love you too," Dahlia said. "Thank you for seeing me when I could not see myself, for believing in me when I could not believe in myself." "Always," Vaughn promised. "In this life and whatever comes after, I will always find you and love you." The years continued to pass, marked by small joys and occasional sorrows. They lost the barn cat to old age and adopted 2 kittens to take his place. Henry broke his arm falling out of a tree and wore the sling like a badge of honor. Ruth learned to ride and proved to be a natural horsewoman. They weathered droughts and hard winters, celebrated good harvests and the birth of neighbors' children through it all. Dahlia and Vaughn's love remained the foundation of their family. They still went on walks together when they could, still talked late into the night about their dreams and fears. The physical passion between them never faded, but it was complemented now by a deep companionship, the kind that comes from truly knowing another person and being fully known in return. Dahlia published more stories over the years, eventually compiling them into a book that a small publisher agreed to print. It was not a bestseller, but it sold steadily, and she received letters from readers telling her how much her stories meant to them. Some were from other women who had survived trauma, who saw themselves in her words and found hope. Those letters meant more to Dahlia than any amount of money or fame could. To know that her pain had been transformed into something that could help others was a kind of redemption she had not known she needed. In 1892, when Dahlia was 30 years old and Vaughn 33, they learned they were expecting another child. It was a surprise, as they had assumed their family was complete. But surprises could be good things. They reminded each other this pregnancy was harder than the previous 2. Dahlia was older now, and her body did not bounce back as easily. She was tired more often, and there were complications that worried the doctor. Vaughn was terrified, hovering even more than he had with the other pregnancies. But Dahlia was stronger than she looked. In January of 1893, she gave birth to twin boys, identical and tiny but healthy. They named them Thomas and James, after their grandfathers on Vaughn's side, giving them the middle names Henry and Marcus after Dahlia's father. With 5 children now, their home was full to bursting with noise and energy and love. Henry, now nearly 14, was a tremendous help with his younger siblings. Ruth, nearly 10, proved to be a natural caretaker, watching over the twins with a protectiveness that reminded Dahlia of herself. The twins were a handful, identical in appearance but different in temperament. Thomas was bold and adventurous, always getting into mischief. James was quieter, more thoughtful, content to follow his brother's lead but occasionally putting on the brakes when Thomas's schemes got too outrageous. Life was chaotic and exhausting and absolutely wonderful. There were days when Dahlia collapsed into bed so tired she could barely move. But there were also days filled with laughter and small perfect moments. Ruth reading to the twins, Henry teaching them to throw a ball, Vaughn coming in from work and being mobbed by children all clamoring for his attention. As the years passed, their children grew and began to forge their own paths. Henry decided he wanted to be a rancher like his father and began working more seriously at the Circle T. Ruth discovered a love of teaching and began helping at the small schoolhouse in town. The twins remained inseparable, partners in crime and best friends. Dahlia and Vaughn grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines appearing at the corners of their eyes. But they were happy lines, earned through years of laughter and love. Their bodies grew softer, worn by hard work and time, but they still fit together perfectly. On their 20th wedding anniversary, in December of 1898, Vaughn surprised Dahlia with a special gift. He took her back to that outcropping in the foothills where they had spent their first morning together, the place where he had told her she could write again. They rode up as they had that first time, older now but still comfortable in the saddle. The view was just as spectacular as Dahlia remembered, and standing there, she was flooded with memories of the scared, broken girl she had been. "I brought you something," Vaughn said, pulling a small package from his saddlebag. Inside was a beautiful frame, and within the frame was a mosaic, intricate and stunning. It depicted a sunset over mountains, created from hundreds of tiny pieces of colored glass and pottery. "I made it," Vaughn admitted, looking almost embarrassed. "Well, I had help from a craftsman in Tucson. But I chose all the pieces and the design. I wanted you to have it to remember." Dahlia ran her fingers over the smooth glass, tears streaming down her face. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "Broken pieces creating something beautiful," Vaughn said softly. "That is what we did, Dahlia. We took all our broken pieces and created this beautiful life, and I would not change a single thing." "Neither would I," Dahlia said, turning to embrace her husband. "Thank you, Vaughn, for everything, for seeing me, for loving me, for giving me the family and the life I dreamed of." "Thank you for letting me love you," Vaughn replied, "for trusting me with your heart when you had every reason not to trust anyone. You are the bravest person I know." They stood there on that overlook, holding each other, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life full of light. Below them, the town of Oro Blanco sprawled out, and beyond that, their homestead where their children waited. It was a good life, a beautiful life, created from broken pieces with love and patience and faith. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, Dahlia thought about how far she had come. From that broken girl by the creek to this woman surrounded by love, from silence to a voice that was heard, from fragments to wholeness, the scars remained. They always would. The memory of that terrible night and the loss of her parents would never fully leave her. But the scars were part of her story, part of what made her who she was. They did not define her anymore. They were simply pieces of the mosaic, dark threads in a tapestry that was, overall, beautiful. The years continued their steady march. Henry married a sweet girl from town named Sarah, and they built a house on a portion of Dahlia and Vaughn's land. Ruth became a full-time teacher and eventually married a kind man named David who ran the general store. The twins, true to form, both decided to go to the territorial university, the first in the family to seek higher education. Dahlia and Vaughn became grandparents, watching their children become parents in turn. There was nothing quite like the joy of holding a grandchild, of seeing your own children navigate the challenges of parenthood. They were there to offer advice when asked, to babysit when needed, to simply love these new additions to their growing family. Through it all, Dahlia continued to write. Her books had a modest but loyal following, and she had become something of a local celebrity in Oro Blanco. She used her small platform to speak about trauma and healing, to encourage other women to find their voices and tell their stories. Vaughn became a respected member of the community, known for his fairness and his willingness to help anyone in need. He eventually became part owner of the Circle T when Thomas Carlyle passed away, leaving him a portion of the ranch in his will. It was the culmination of decades of hard work and loyalty. In the spring of 1905, Dahlia and Vaughn celebrated their 50th birthdays within a month of each other. Their children threw them a party, gathering the whole family together for a weekend of celebration. There were grandchildren running everywhere, old friends telling stories, food and music and laughter. As Dahlia looked around at the gathering, at the family she and Vaughn had created, she felt overwhelming gratitude. All of this, everything good in her life, had stemmed from that moment outside the saloon when a kind cowboy had seen her fear and offered his friendship. Later that evening, after most of the guests had gone home and the grandchildren had been put to bed, Dahlia and Vaughn sat on their porch as they had countless times before. The stars were bright overhead, and a warm breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers from Dahlia's garden. "If you could go back," Vaughn asked suddenly, "back to that day we met, knowing everything that would come after, would you change anything?" Dahlia considered the question carefully. "I would change what happened to my parents," she said finally. "I will always wish that had been different. But everything after, everything with you, I would not change a single moment." "Even the hard parts?" Vaughn asked. "Especially the hard parts," Dahlia said, "because they made us who we are. They taught us to appreciate what we have. And they showed us that we are stronger together than we ever could be apart." Vaughn reached over and took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that had begun to trouble his joints. "I love you, Dahlia. I have loved you for 27 years, and I will love you for however many more we are given." "I love you too," Dahlia said. "You saved my life, Vaughn Barrett, not just by helping me survive, but by showing me how to truly live again." "We saved each other," Vaughn insisted. "We built this beautiful mosaic together." As they sat there under the stars, Dahlia thought about the girl she had been, the one who had feared she was too broken to ever be whole again. If she could go back and tell that girl anything, it would be this: broken does not mean ruined, and scars do not have to define you. With love and patience and courage, you can rebuild yourself into something even more beautiful than you were before. The broken pieces of her life had indeed created a beautiful mosaic, richer and more meaningful because of the cracks and fractures, because of the darkness that made the light shine brighter by contrast. She had survived. More than that, she had thrived. She had loved and been loved, had created life and art, had built something lasting and good. And it had all started with a cowboy who looked at her broken pieces and saw not ruin but possibility, who had offered his hand and his heart and had been patient enough to wait while she learned to accept both. Years continued to pass, bringing with them the joys and sorrows that are part of any long life. They lost friends to age and illness. They watched their grandchildren grow and begin having children of their own. Their bodies slowed, requiring canes and afternoon naps, but their minds remained sharp and their love for each other never dimmed. In the summer of 1915, Vaughn fell ill with pneumonia. At 63, he did not have the strength to fight it off as he once might have. Dahlia nursed him tirelessly, barely sleeping, holding his hand and telling him stories of their life together. "Do not leave me," she whispered one night when his breathing was particularly labored. "I am not ready to say goodbye." Vaughn opened his eyes, focusing on her face with effort. "My beautiful Dahlia," he rasped, "I could never truly leave you. I will be in every sunset, every star, every warm breeze. And besides, I am too stubborn to die. You know that." He was right about the stubbornness. Against all odds, Vaughn recovered, though he was weaker than before. The illness had taken its toll, and everyone knew he would not regain the strength he had lost. But he was alive, and that was what mattered. He spent his days on the porch, watching the world go by, surrounded by family. Great-grandchildren would climb into his lap to hear stories about the old days, about cattle drives and building the homestead. Dahlia would sit beside him, sometimes reading aloud, sometimes just holding his hand. In the spring of 1918, it was Dahlia's turn to face mortality. She suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed on one side. The doctor was not optimistic about her chances, but Dahlia was not ready to give up. She had too much to live for. With Vaughn's encouragement and her children's help, she worked tirelessly to regain what function she could. It was frustrating and exhausting, but she refused to give in to despair. She had survived too much, overcome too many obstacles, to let this be the thing that defeated her. After months of effort, she could walk again with the help of a cane. Her right hand remained weak, and her speech was sometimes slurred, but she was alive and still herself. She could still write, laboriously and slowly, but the words still came. Vaughn cared for her with the same patience and devotion she had shown him. Their roles reversed. He became the nurse and she the patient, and neither complained about the burden. This was marriage, they both understood. This was the promise they had made, in sickness and in health, for better or worse. On December 15, 1918, they celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. Their entire family gathered, 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren, a tribe created from the love of 2 people who had found each other when they needed it most. There was a cake and presents, stories and laughter. But the best moment came late in the evening when everyone else had gone and Dahlia and Vaughn were alone in their bedroom. 40 years, Vaughn said wonderingly. How did we get so lucky? It was not luck, Dahlia said, her words careful but clear. It was choice. Every day we chose each other. We chose love. Best choice I ever made, Vaughn said, carefully climbing into bed beside her. They lay together as they had thousands of times before, her head on his chest, his arm around her shoulders. You think we will have more time? Dahlia asked quietly. Or is this the end? I think we will have as much time as we are given, Vaughn replied. And whatever that time is, we will make it beautiful. We will fill it with love and family and all the things that matter. That is what we have always done. Broken pieces creating beautiful mosaics, Dahlia murmured. Until the very end, Vaughn agreed. They lived another 7 years together, growing frailer but no less devoted to each other. Vaughn passed first in his sleep on a quiet spring morning in 1925. He was 73 years old. Dahlia was with him, had been with him all night, somehow knowing that the end was near. "I love you," she whispered as she felt him slip away. "I will find you again. In the next life I will find you." The grief of losing him was immense, a weight that threatened to crush her. But Dahlia was not the broken girl she had been so long ago. She was strong now, tempered by years of love and loss, of joy and sorrow. She grieved deeply, but she did not break. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, making sure she was never alone. She moved into Henry's house, where she could be surrounded by family. She continued to write when her hand allowed, working on a memoir of her life with Vaughn, determined that their story would not be forgotten. Dahlia lived for 3 more years after Vaughn's death. Years filled with family and memories and quiet contentment. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about their great-grandfather, about how he had saved her, and how together they had built something beautiful from broken pieces. On a warm October evening in 1928, Dahlia passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was 70 years old. Her children found her in the morning, a smile on her face, as if she had seen something wonderful. They buried her next to Vaughn on a hillside overlooking their homestead. The view from the graves was spectacular, encompassing the land they had cultivated, the home they had built, and the town of Oro Blanco in the distance. At the funeral, Ruth stood to speak about her mother. "My mother taught us many things," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. "She taught us the value of hard work, the importance of education, the power of perseverance. But most of all, she taught us about love, about how love can heal even the deepest wounds, how it can give you strength when you thought you had none left. She also taught us that being broken is not the end of the story," Ruth continued. "That from broken pieces, with patience and love and faith, you can create something beautiful. She and our father lived that truth every day of their lives together." As the family gathered around the graves, the youngest great-grandchild, a girl of 6, spoke up suddenly. "Great-grandma is not really gone," she said with the certainty of childhood. "She is with great-grandpa now, and they are dancing." The image brought smiles through the tears. Yes, Dahlia and Vaughn were together again, whatever form that togetherness took. They had promised to find each other, and everyone who had known them believed they would keep that promise. Years passed, and the story of Dahlia and Vaughn became family legend, passed down through generations. The homestead they had built remained in the family, expanded and improved but still fundamentally the same. The mosaic Vaughn had made for Dahlia was carefully preserved, hung in a place of honor where all could see it and remember. Their descendants thrived, carrying forward the values and the love that Dahlia and Vaughn had instilled. Teachers and ranchers, writers and doctors, each one touched by the legacy of 2 people who had refused to let tragedy define them, who had chosen instead to build something beautiful from their broken pieces. The land itself seemed to remember them. Visitors to the graves would sometimes report feeling a sense of peace there, as if the love that Dahlia and Vaughn had shared had somehow seeped into the very earth. On quiet evenings, when the sun set in brilliant colors over the mountains, it was easy to imagine them there still, sitting on their porch, holding hands, watching their family grow and thrive. In the end, their story was a simple one. 2 broken people who found each other, who chose love over fear, hope over despair, healing over bitterness. They had taken all their shattered pieces and created a life that was beautiful and meaningful and full of love. It was a story of survival and redemption, of pain transformed into purpose. It was a story that proved that no matter how broken you feel, with love and patience and courage, you can become whole again. You can create a beautiful mosaic from your broken pieces. And perhaps most importantly, it was a story that proved that the greatest act of courage is not in never breaking, but in choosing to rebuild. In refusing to let your pain have the final word. In daring to hope, to love, to trust again even when you have every reason not to. That was the legacy of Dahlia and Vaughn Barrett, a legacy that lived on in their descendants and in the land they had loved. A legacy that whispered across the years, "You are not too broken, you are not beyond repair, and with love, anything is possible." The sun set over the Arizona mountains, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple, just as it had done on that first day when Vaughn had told Dahlia about mosaics. And somewhere in that sunset, in the warm breeze and the fading light, the love of Dahlia and Vaughn Barrett lived on, eternal and unbreakable, a beautiful mosaic created from broken pieces that had found a way to become whole.